Hello, and a very warm welcome to another edition of Passions. And this time, I really am delighted because we've got a repeat, not a repeat of the interview, but a repeat of the guest. And I'm delighted to be welcoming back Mark Preston to the Passions show. So, Mark, thank you very much indeed for joining us today again on our second interview. Just start off by telling, for those people watching or listening to this, just tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you're actually passionate about.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Mark Preston. I am currently Motorsport Director of Lola Cars, which is re-entering motorsport after being away for about 10 years. And my passion is all around motorsport, has been since I was at university. I think, gosh, can't remember how many years ago, 30 or so years, back in Australia. When I was at university, I started to play around with racing cars while I was still in university and continued on from there. Did Formula Fords and touring cars in Australia. Came over to the UK to do Formula One with Arrows Grand Prix, then McLaren Racing or McLaren F1. Then I got to start a Formula One team with Aguri Suzuki and Honda, which is great, called Super Aguri F1. And then I moved into Formula Electric. And for the last 10 years or so, I've been doing Formula Electric and helping to bring Lola into Formula E in the World Championship with Yamaha.
Absolutely fantastic. Right. Okay, then. So tell me the story, if you like, as to how you ended up at Lola. Because I think when we interviewed you the first time, you were at TS Cheetah, weren't you?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
sadly, DS Techeetah, the backers of that pulled out of motorsport. It's something that does happen every so often,
Yeah.
as you can
Yeah.
see in the sport. But at the same time, we were chatting to the new owner of Lola Cars, Till Bechtelsheimer, and kept discussing. And we had the opportunity to bring Yamaha into Formula E, and so we all worked together in the background. And over the last year and a half, we've been working on a powertrain with Yamaha to enter the next season of Formula E. We actually go testing. This is in early October. We're going testing early November with all the other teams, and then we go racing in Sao Paulo for the first race with the Lola App team. So it's going to be really good fun this next season.
Fabulous. I think, is that 7th of December in Sao Paulo, did I read?
Yes, I think that sounds right. Yeah, that's about the
Yeah,
right
not
date.
putting you on the spot, but you know your dates.
I don't know if it's a Saturday or the Sunday, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
that
yeah.
weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Okay, fantastic. So, have Yamaha been involved in motor racing in the last few years in general?
So it's a really interesting story, actually, because when I first came to the UK and worked at Arrows Grand Prix, we actually had a Yamaha engine. So it's interesting. That's the last time they were released in four-wheel motorsport, at least at a world championship level. Obviously, they do a lot of racing in motorbikes, all sorts of other racing to do with bikes. But this is their automotive division who is looking at the future of electrification. And Formula E, being a world championship, seemed like the best place to go back to four-wheel motorsport with Lola as a partner. So it's going to be a great partnership, and we're really all looking forward to it. The pressure's building on all sides of the team, but it's a good pressure, and everyone's really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I know Yamaha because when I used to be younger and had hair on my head, I was quite a big motorcycling fan, and I used to have a Yamaha motorbike, so that's how I knew. That's why I asked the question, really, because I know them from a motorcycle perspective and actually from a keyboard perspective as well, because
Yes.
there's a keyboard behind me here. So it must be really exciting then to take all the newness and freshness of it. Is it fair to say that does it reinvigorate your passion when you get a new project, or is it just always there bubbling away in the background, or a bit of both?
I think it reinvigorates because
Mm.
sometimes, after being in one team for a while, I'm not saying get stale because you're always trying to compete, but a new project with a new group, we're getting to know each other. I enjoy the change, the newness of everything. Doing something that perhaps nobody's done before is a really big part of what I like to do. And this is an interesting challenge, bringing Yamaha back into motorsport, bringing Lola back into motorsport. Well, not Yamaha back into motorsport, but into four-wheel motorsport. And
Yeah.
bringing Lola back into motorsport is an exciting thing, and it's only the start of what Lola's going to be doing over the next few years. So, yes, this kind of startup or newness is the bit I'm really passionate about.
And were there any moments, Mark, where you thought it might not happen, or has it been all smooth? Has it been all smooth sailing, or was there a time you thought, "Is this ever going to happen?"
Oh no, it's always like that. I mean, I find that the same in any big project. It's especially something new. It's constantly, is this going to happen? Is that going to happen? And there's always just so many trials and tribulations you have to go through to get the deal done. It's on both sides. We're all working away. Nobody stopped working on it, but it does take time. And you do have to be kind of focused on the end game, and there'll be lots of ups and downs between now and when you get to the end of the project, or even the start of the project. So I'd say never give up is certainly part of the being passionate about something.
And do you find that your passion initially started off in traditional motorsport, in that dirty carbon stuff. Do you ever find yourself in a position where, from an engineering challenge point of view, you think, "Oh, this E bit is so frustrating, because if I could just do that bit using my traditional engineering knowledge, we could move forward a lot faster and get a lot faster," or is it just an acceptance that E is the key driver?
Well, the funny thing is, I'd say we can do things in Formula E that I couldn't do in F1. So
Right, right.
there's a silly little thing that not silly, it's a very important thing actually.
Yeah.
Engaging the clutch on the launch of a car in F1. If anyone's into it, you'll read in the not so distant future past, sorry, you'll hear drivers when they come up to the grid where they're talking about bite points. So it's figuring out when the clutch is, it wears a bit, and when it gets hot, it expands, and there's lots of things going on in that situation. It's quite a hard thing to model, and it's a little bit frustrating because it's not pure performance. Um, well, you know that if you could get rid of that part, you'd be faster. And the good thing about Formula E is we don't have that, because we don't have a clutch. So one of the elements that frustrated me in F1 is actually solved in Formula E, because you have to solve different problems. So I think it's quite exciting, the stuff that happens in electrified motorsport. There's all sorts of things we're all learning about the differences between electric powertrains and internal combustion or hybrid powertrains, in all sorts of interesting things that I think are better because they're faster, but they are difficult to solve because no one's had to do them before. As many people say, you can, and when you're doing internal combustion engines, you've been doing that for 100 years, whereas electrified power motorsport is only sort of 10 or 15 years old. And so there's still a lot of learnings in the basics. Now, electric motors themselves have been around for a long time, but in this sort of high level of motorsport, there's still all sorts of very interesting things we're finding. So I suppose maybe that's just motorsport in general. When you have a competition, people find the next thing and the next thing and the next thing that they're trying to find. So it never ceases to amaze me, some of the things we find as time goes on.
It seems almost as if you're as much a scientist as you are an engineer, actually.
Well, I suppose, if I look back at when I was at high school, I wasn't in the chess club, and I wasn't really I played sport, but not at the highest level. But when I was got into motorsport, I think you would say that engineering in motorsport is a sport in a way, because you're competing on the engineering side. And so I would say that's part of the reason it's so passionate, is it's like a sport. It's a technical sport for engineers. And I mean, sometimes that maybe some people say, "Oh, the engineers are doing too much and they're going too far," but it's the fun bit of motorsport, is that it is a kind of technical sport, really, for us geeks.
And is there a two-way process then, Mark, as well, between what you might call commercial e-vehicles, like obviously Tesla's jumps to mind, and what they're trying to develop and learn, and what you're trying to develop and learn in motorsport? Is there a two-way exchange of information, or is it more of a one-way, or you act as silos?
Certainly, part of the reason that Yamaha is doing Formula E is that this is the cutting edge of electrification.
Mm.
In motorsport, as I found, when my experience in F1 was the same, really. That when I worked with Honda and Renault and all of those teams in F1, they were pushing the boundaries of internal combustion engine. And it's not always that the exact technology goes across from motor racing to the road cars. Sometimes it's just a concept or a theory or a process that we push to the boundaries in motorsport, because we have a bigger budget, or the one-off piece price of a part on a race car can be more expensive than the part when it goes into a road car, which has to be to a target price. Maybe it's a pound on a road car, and it could be £1,000 in a race car. Now, that's a pretty big difference, and the performance usually is proportional to what you can spend on that part. So maybe you can't take that part straight across to a road car, but you can take the concepts and the learning and find maybe a different way of doing it on a road car once you know what's possible. And sometimes it's the art of the possible, which means that you can't forget what you learn. And some of the road car guys that are working with us will go back to a road car and say, we found this in race cars. This is a theory. This worked. What could we do in a road car? We can't maybe afford it to do it the same way as the race car, but the concept works. So how do we do something similar, or at least heading towards that solution? And that's the kind of best bit about motor racing, when you can take concepts across to the road. And there's a number of examples out there that and probably a lot that people won't maybe speak about, because maybe it's worked really well and they've taken that into a road car or a road bike and saying, well, we can't tell anybody that because it was something we discovered in motor racing, and it's a competitive advantage.
Yeah, of course, that's the key, isn't it? It's the competitive advantage. And I'm assuming you're working on budgets, obviously. Are you working on budgets that are very similar to the other competitors, or is there quite a big difference, a big gap like there is, say, in Formula One, traditional Formula
Well,
One?
yeah, traditional Formula One was sort of uncapped, but as you probably know, Formula One and Formula E have budget caps now. So all the teams and the manufacturers in Formula E have budget caps. So at least the top is capped, and so therefore it keeps the series more close together in that respect.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that people talk about, isn't it, with motorsport? The Formula One, certainly. And like I mentioned last time, I do follow Formula One. There's always this big discussion and debate about, could Hamilton still win or Verstappen still win if they were in another car? What's your views on that?
Yeah, it's so I often sort of talk about this in terms of a kind of a macro effect. So if there's probably people that are football fans that are listening to this show, um, you don't just get one piece of the puzzle. You can't just have a goalie or a striker or a midfielder or a great coach or the right amount of budget. You have to have all the pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah,
And that's the same is true in motorsport. What I find is that I sort of call it the macro effects. When you're successful, often it's you have the right powertrain with the right driver, the right group of people, the right amount of budget, all of the pieces, the parameters that impact the performance of the team are the best they can be at the time. If you're missing one piece of the puzzle, then perhaps it's hard to deliver. So if you're talking about F1, if maybe you don't have the best aerodynamics or the best powertrain, you might have the best tires, and well, they're all the same now, or the best understanding of tires. If you're missing one piece of the puzzle, then it's very difficult to win, especially at this top level. So winning at the top level does require having pretty much all the pieces to the puzzle, not completely perfect, but at least all of the big pieces very, very close to being perfection as such.
right. And then how similar are the cars then when it comes to the actual cars themselves? If I'm driving, say, I don't know, if I'm, say, a Mercedes car, for example, and then I get myself into a Lola car, am I likely to be able to drive it just in the same way, or are there some fundamental differences in terms of the way that they drive or the way that they're put together?
So in Formula E, it's all about the powertrain and software. So that is the focus of Formula E. F1 is a bit different because there's freedom across the board, and therefore there are more differences in an F1 car. But in Formula E, we've decided, or from the beginning, it was decided to focus down on the things that were really differentiating. So the powertrain itself, and all the software that controls the powertrain. It sounds simple, but that is highly complicated. And software is free in Formula E. And also, we're also doing four-wheel drive next year in certain circumstances. Could you jump between each car, between a Lola, Jaguar, Nissan, Porsche in Formula E? You could, but you'd have to learn the software differences and all of the nomenclature and processes and procedures. You could still drive it, but it would be you'd have to learn all the bits and pieces in order to get up to speed. So we've got a young driver now, Zane Maloney, who's joined us from F2. So he's on a steep learning curve, coming from petrol-powered motorsport F2, where he was competing with some of the guys that are going into F1 next year. And he's on a steep learning curve, but he's got Lucas de Grassi as our other driver, his compatriot in the team, and he is probably one of the most experienced drivers in Formula E, and so he's got a great person to learn from. So he's coming up to speed pretty fast, but that's what the young guys are good at.
And is there a typical driver behind? Pardon the pun. Is there a particular driver behind the people that come into Formula E from Formula One or from Formula Two in that scenario? Are they very often, I want to drive now in Formula E because it's up and coming and maybe I care about the planet and there's a principle involved? Or is it just simply the fact that they just want to drive and that's where the drive opportunity is?
It's probably more of the second version, because driving at a top level team is what all young drivers are targeting.
Yeah.
And as you can imagine, there's not that many drives in the world,
Yeah.
Especially in a world championship. So Formula E is a world championship, just like Formula One. So when you get to the top level, there are only a certain amount of seats. And so this is an opportunity that I hope for him is too good to be true. No, it's an opportunity to get in with the top team with Yamaha Lola, and it takes him in a direction which is, helps to define his future. So yeah, it's an opportunity to drive in a top team in a world championship. That's why he's coming with us, because there's just not that many drives out there in the world.
Yeah, no, I totally get you. I suppose you mentioned football. I suppose it's a bit like footballers who have supported Manchester City all their lives, or I'm not going to play for Liverpool because I've supported. No, it's an opportunity. Get your boots on and deal with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Okay. And in terms of your experience, I'm not obviously expecting you to name names or anything, but are there certain, how does the passion in the drivers manifest itself? Are there some that are very passionate to the point of throwing helmets across the garage, and there are others that are just as passionate but are able to keep a lid on those emotions? Or is it a complete melting pot of all of those things?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Certainly at the moment, both of our drivers are very passionate about making a success of this new team, this new powertrain, helping the team to work together. So we've got Lola and Yamaha working together on the powertrain, and we're working with Apt, who are running the race team. And so together we're all gelling as fast as we can as people. And it's the part of it is the driver also being focused on succeeding as well, and that comes through in their enthusiasm, the way they drive the car. You can see how passionate they are, and how hard they're pushing the car, how much they're pushing the engineers, how much they're feeding back, how much they're encouraging, let's say, more than encouraging, that we need to go faster, we need to do this, need to do that, and how involved they are. So Lucas is really a great driver to have with us in this first year for Lola Yamaha, because he's done it for so long, and he's also passionate about getting this project to be successful. So that does show up. It does. Then I suppose with you going to your question about throwing helmets across the room, they're so expensive now. It's a little bit harder to maybe throw the gloves. Throwing a helmet would be pretty expensive.
Yeah,
I'm sure. I haven't seen one of those for a while, actually. I don't even know when I last saw that. But as things build up to the first race, and any success that we have, if something goes wrong for some reason, the frustration, of course, will spill over. When we thought we're all doing a good job, let's say, and I'm thinking to the future. So if something goes wrung with what we're doing, of course, the frustrations will come through, especially if it's going well and like we hope. Then it'll be more frustrating. So I think, those passions do sort of come out usually when it's going well and then something goes wrong, and you're frustrated because You think, God, I thought we checked that. I thought we did that test. I thought we validated that component. I thought we, made the right decision. That's usually when the frustrations come out. Or I suppose on track when perhaps driver might get taken out by another driver, and that didn't seem fair when we're doing a great job, we think. So
Yeah.
yeah, passions can come out in different ways.
Yeah, no, I get that. I read somewhere that you're involved in doing something around an MBA in motorsport. Is that still something that's
Yeah, so every so
that
often
ticking along in the?
yeah, so some of our sponsors have asked me to do some presentations at some of their senior management away days and things like that. And I did my MBA back in 2005, and I still, keep up with the Side Business School here in Oxford, where I did my MBA. And every so often, I do some presentations for different classes. I do one every so often for a healthcare program, which is really fascinating because there's a lot of people from hospitals and care centers and things all around the world, usually looking at things like how can they do a better job in their surgeries or their operations, and taking ideas from motorsport, looking at pit stops and how does a pit stop work and why does it, why does it work and
Yeah,
how does it work,
yeah,
and a lot of the questions that I get asked is similar to this actually. What does it mean in a high performance team? What do you do differently? Do you do anything differently? Is there things that we can cross over into our normal day jobs? And the one that sticks out to me the most in those conversations is people say, but you've got all the money in the world. And it's like, yeah, but we always want more money in motor racing, as do you. But what I
yeah,
found is the best examples is to show the marginal gains idea, that there is always
mm,
something you can do, small aspects of what you do every day that don't cost any money often, that can make you go maybe not faster, but certainly perform better, have better teamwork, have better pride in your work. Um, I'm trying to think of a good example, but there's there's trying to think of a really good simple one. But there's when you think about it, there's simple things you can do every day that make a small difference, but maybe sometimes it's bigger than you imagine, with people in your work. And so the thing that kind of comes through is walking the floor. So there's a Japanese word called gemba, which means go to the place, go and see the problem. It's what Toyota talks about a lot in their Toyota production system. And so it's also what my great uncle used to tell my dad, go to the place, talk to the people, find the problem. And often the solutions that don't cost much money, and perhaps sometimes nothing at all. It might be just information or something like that. So that's what comes through. Actually, the majority of the time is because I'm presenting to people that are not in motorsports. They're interested in the parallels and the ideas that can
yeah,
come from motorsports.
yeah,
And
yeah,
especially when you take concepts from an MBA and find a motorsports example and put that together, then people are, it makes the story more interesting to talk about something that you're doing in a class.
yeah. No, it's absolutely true, and it's what they call fine margins, isn't it? And I don't think you'll get anything more fine margin than motorsport. You're talking a thousandths of it's hard to even contemplate that you can be looking at a thousandth of a second difference in a race.
You also got to find the other one that goes down that people like is finding small wins. So can you win something? So when we were at Super Aguri in Formula One, we knew we could. First year, we knew we couldn't win we couldn't win a race. We couldn't win the championship, definitely. So we tried to find things we could win. And that year, Renault and Ferrari were battling away, so they were at the other end of pit lane. But we realized we might be able to find little things that we could win. Um, Sorry, my dog barking there.
That's okay.
um,
Makes it more realistic.
Finding little things we could win, and there was a little one where in motorsport, when you look at the grid when it's the start, the teams take the mechanics. You see them taking the tire warmers off the car, and they
Yeah.
always wait as long as they can. And we were watching it on TV, and we noticed that Ferrari and Renault were waiting just a little bit longer than everybody else, and we thought that's quite visual. Why don't at the next race we try to wait later than Ferrari and McLaren? Because everyone will see it, or at least in pit lane they'll see it. doesn't mean that we're going to win. No one's going to know that we won something. But basically, the next race, we waited, I think, 5 or 10 more seconds, took a fair bit of risk, but we're at the back of the grid. So it's not like we're going to be
Making a
penalized.
difference. Yeah, 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 yeah.
And,
Yeah.
but the guys at Renault and Ferrari started to notice what we were doing. We were trying to find parameters that we could win. And they started to notice in their championship year, because they were trying to beat each other, of course. And they started to notice the little things that we were trying to win, like how fast you could come into the pits and little numbers like that don't mean you're going to win the race, but they're things you have to chip away at to win a championship. And that's one of the other stories that people like to take home as well, because they see, okay, I can go back to my hospital or my other place of work and find small wins in different places that everyone
Yes.
could work on,
Yes.
and be proud of together.
Yeah, I mean, the comparison is very, very true. And that's why you also get, of course, sports people who'll do speeches at conferences and such like as well, don't you?
Yeah.
And it's, and I think it's true. And this is part of the reason we've started this channel, really, was to find those little tips, those little hints, those little, we didn't think people were going to come in and come up with something that's suddenly going to treble the size of a business a week on Friday. It was always about those fine margins. And I suppose at the same time, there has to be an element of patience in that process, doesn't there? But patience under the massive pressure to win.
I think
So
that's
it's an
where
interest. Yeah.
I think that's where you've got to find small wins quickly. I think patience, everybody everybody's not patient, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's often things you can do very, very simply, that small wins that can happen quickly in the low hanging fruit. And then there's other things that are going to take longer to solve. And the small things could be something slightly different, choosing a hotel maybe at the next race, or something where you could, the one they use in the Sky Tour de France example is taking different pillows to sleep on. That's the kind of thing you could change at the next race, or perhaps inspecting a different hotel or choosing a different restaurant, or things where you might find that there's it seems small, but maybe it has a bigger impact than you think. I'll give you another silly example. When we were testing recently, we had a bit of trouble with connectivity when we were overseas, because we didn't have enough bandwidth. And buying another SIM card that had 100 gigabytes might have cost £20. And so that was a little thing we could do to make everyone's life easier at the test. It doesn't seem like a lot, but the stress level drops down, and nobody will notice that there was a change, but they might go, "Oh, the first test was really bad, but the second test was okay." And perhaps we solved it through something quite simple and cheap. And you can see that there's those kind of wins you can have in all sorts of places.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Right. Okay. Well, we'll come to the end. We've come to the end of the time, as always just flies by when I'm talking to you, Mark. But in terms of the bigger, wider picture, do you think there's a limit in engineering progression and innovation that you'll get to where there's very little or not a lot more you can do, or does it never end?
I find it never ends. I think the best example is, there's often people say you can write a PhD on that subject. When you get into a very small area, you start to learn more, and the more you know, the more you don't know. And then, I mean, I've talked to a few of the car manufacturers that started in Formula E in the beginning, and I said, "Do you think you would have come this far since the beginning?" And they said, "No, we didn't think there was that much room to develop in electric racing." But I said, "And do you still think there is?" And that, yes, there's still details and learnings, and in everything. And so the margins do get smaller and smaller, but then the FIA changes the rules in order to keep the whole thing progressing. So
Yeah.
next
Yeah.
season that we're coming into, we're going to be able to run full drive in certain circumstances. So that's a pretty big step. So even if we were maybe getting closer on some things, this is now a bigger step that everyone's got to learn. So there's also freedoms that the rule makers can give in order to give a little bit more freedom, and therefore a little bit more room for development.
That's what's wonderful. And of course, I'll be watching adamantly, as I was when you were doing the cheater. I'll be watching adamantly, and I wish you all the best. And I'll be cheering you on from the sofa.
Thanks very much, Phil.
And I hope it all goes really, really well. I've no doubts it will. And congratulations on what has been obviously a very successful time for you overall. And I think that's just wonderful. And I hope they're all cheering you on back in Australia as well.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you.
Thanks then, Mark. Thanks for joining me. And one day I will meet you. I'm sure of it.
Yes, indeed. At a race.
At a race. Yes, that'd be wonderful. And as I say, just, all the very, very best. And thank you, sincerely thank you for your time, because I know that, your time's precious and I appreciate that. And thanks for joining us on your second interview with the Passions Project and showing the passion that you always show. And it's clear to see. So thank you again.